The sound of a glass shattering echoed across the cold tile floor. Champagne spilled onto a white blouse, spreading dark stains across an expensive navy suit. Adriana Miles, the 38-year-old woman who had built a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, stood frozen in the VIP lounge. Around her, passengers stayed silent. Some lowered their heads and pretended to scroll through their phones, while others cast quick glances filled with curiosity and discomfort. This scene, lasting only a few short minutes, became a verdict delivered by an entire system. Adriana did not scream, did not lash out, did not beg. She simply stood still, feeling each cold drop slide across her skin, etching into her memory the moment her dignity was stripped away in a place she had paid for, fought for, with sweat and brilliance. Inside her chest, a storm was rising, yet her face remained motionless, like stone. At the reception desk, Carlton, a young employee with a strained smile, gripped his keyboard tightly. A quiet hesitation gnawed at him, a hidden fear. Does she really belong here? Behind him, Wayne, the lounge manager, swallowed hard. He knew this was wrong, but the cold, commanding gaze of Bradley Whitmore, Adriana's longtime rival, bore down on him. Bradley walked slowly forward, each step of his polished leather shoes striking the floor like the beat of triumph. "That's my seat," he said, his deep, gravelly voice dripping with arrogance and entitlement. Adriana lifted her head, her eyes locked with Bradley's. In his gaze there was not just contempt, but a message from an old order. No matter how wealthy, women of color were still expected to step aside. No. One word, sharp as a blade. Wayne stiffened. Carlton swallowed hard. The air froze. Somewhere, a silver spoon fell, its clink stretching out like the pounding of every heart in the room. Security appeared. Trevor, broad-shouldered and built like a wall of stone, moved forward. Noah, younger, eager to prove himself, followed close behind. They did not ask questions, did not weigh the situation. They simply followed orders. "Ma'am, we need you to leave the seat," Trevor said, his tone laced with menace. Adriana calmly picked up her phone and pressed record. "This is discrimination," she said slowly, each word cutting through the silence. But Dennis, the salt-and-pepper-haired airport manager, was already standing there. "Take her out," he commanded, as if ending a charade. When Trevor's rough hand grabbed her arm, the champagne glass toppled, spilling its bitter scent over the humiliation in the air. Adriana was dragged from her seat, through rows of plush chairs, past faces that turned away. Bradley strolled casually into her seat, lifting a glass of scotch like a conqueror celebrating his victory. To those watching, Adriana looked powerless. But no one knew that the woman being humiliated was the largest shareholder of Silverwings Airlines, the one holding 28% of the company's fate. Outside in the terminal, Adriana stopped. Champagne dripped from her jacket onto the polished stone floor. She did not tremble, did not scream. She only exhaled, one long breath carrying both pain and resolve. In her mind, her grandmother's words resurfaced. "You must be twice as good to earn half the recognition." She had lived by those words her entire life. And now, being dragged from the lounge of an airline her company helped sustain, She realized this was not just a personal humiliation. This was the beginning of a revolution. In a far corner, a few passengers discreetly filmed. They did not yet realize they were capturing a moment that would shake the entire aviation industry. Hours later, those clips would ignite across social media, fueling a storm unlike anything seen before. But at this moment, Adriana simply lifted her phone and sent a short message to her executive team. Urgent. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Overhead, the loudspeaker announced boarding. Travelers bustled past, rushing to flights. But for Adriana Miles, time slowed. Each breath, each heartbeat forged itself into a vow. She would not let this be buried. She would turn humiliation into indictment, and the world would witness it. Morning in Detroit. Sunlight pierced through the worn window frame, spilling into the small room where Adriana once lived. Peeling paint on the walls, the distant hum of a factory at the end of the street, the faint smell of disinfectant still clinging to her mother's nurse uniform. Every detail was etched deep into her heart. Her father, Marcus Miles, finished midnight shifts with calloused hands, hardened by the metal press. Her mother, Teresa, came home with red eyes after double shifts at the hospital. They never had much, but the house was spotless, gleaming like pride itself. When you are poor, you must be even cleaner, because that is dignity, her mother always said. In the tiny kitchen, her grandmother Rosa, with her crown of curly silver hair, repeated the phrase that became Adriana's compass. You have to be twice as good to earn half the recognition. At 18, Adriana walked into Harvard. On her first day, a professor smiled and asked her to wipe the blackboard, assuming she was a custodian. When she handed him her student letter, his face froze for a moment before he turned away as if nothing had happened. Adriana didn't react. She swallowed the sting and transformed the shame into fuel. At Stanford, pursuing her MBA, she often watched male classmates talk over her, snatch her ideas, and present them as their own. The applause thundered for them, while Adriana sat silent, fire smoldering in her eyes. They thought she would quit. They were wrong. In her early years of entrepreneurship, she knocked on investors' doors. They shook hands with her male assistant, ignoring the true founder standing in front of them. One bluntly said, "Great idea, but we need a more reliable CEO, someone who fits the image better." The image? They meant a white man in a light suit. Adriana walked out into the rain, letting it mingle with her tears. But inside her, a growl rose. "One day, you will sign checks to me." That day arrived. Vertex Innovations, the company she built from a dorm room, became a force. Governments and corporations competed to sign contracts for her AI security systems. The company's valuation soared past $3 billion. From the girl once mistaken for a janitor, she had become the name hedge funds spoke of with caution. Yet behind the spotlight, Adriana never forgot the sting of being dismissed. Those memories forged her into a leader who tolerated no injustice and forgave no contempt. On the morning of a landmark deal in Tokyo, Adriana looked into the mirror. A crisp white shirt, a navy suit cut sharp to her frame. Every detail, from the simple pearl earrings to the leather case embossed with the Vertex logo, was a declaration. She was not just present, she belonged. Tanya, her loyal assistant since the early days, handed her the briefing. They added a new security clause. Vincent and I finished revisions at midnight. Adriana nodded, her eyes flashing. This was more than a deal. This was a global statement. But even as she prepared for triumph, the familiar weight pressed on her shoulders. Across the Pacific, Bradley Whitmore, born into privilege, untouched by hunger, had arrived a week early, hosting banquets for Japanese officials. He did not need to prove anything. His name and his bloodline opened every door. Riding to the airport, Adriana looked out the window as sunlight raced across skyscrapers. Pride swelled inside her. From a crumbling home in Detroit, she now flew first class to sign a $750 million contract. Yet she had no idea that just hours later, the very airline she partly owned would dare drag her from its lounge as if she were an outsider. And when it happened, the whole world would learn the price of underestimating Adriana Miles. The sharp click of Adriana's heels echoed against the marble floor as she stepped into the Sky Lumen VIP lounge. The space glittered with crystal chandeliers overhead, polished oak, and the scent of fine wine mingling in the air. Every detail seemed designed to remind its guests, only the most powerful belonged here. She handed her platinum card to the receptionist. Carlton, a young employee with a thin face and distracted eyes, glanced at the card, then looked up at her. His hesitation was obvious, as if his mind needed a few seconds to process the thought that a woman of color could own such a card. "Please wait a moment," Carlton stammered, fingers hammering the keyboard far longer than necessary. Adriana recognized every movement, every glance. This was not new to her. She knew the name of this hesitation, quiet doubt. "The card is valid," Carlton finally said, though surprise still clung to his voice. Adriana smiled lightly. "I know." She chose a leather armchair in the corner, a seat with a perfect view of the runway, where Boeings prepared for takeoff. Placing her leather briefcase to one side, she opened her tablet, eyes locked on her presentation for Tokyo. But the moment her mineral water touched the table, the air in the lounge shifted. Heavy leather shoes, a low, familiar voice. "That's my seat." Adriana looked up. Bradley Whitmore, 40, 5, salt, and pepper hair slicked back, a crimson tie flashing like a badge of power. The CEO of Whitmore Tech, who had spent the past week in Tokyo whining, dining, and persuading. Now he stood before her, chin tilted, eyes heavy with the expectation of privilege. "Sorry, sir," Adriana said calmly. "I was here first." Bradley smirked and turned to Carlton. "You know, I always sit here. 15 years now." Carlton nodded immediately, sweat breaking across his brow. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. Let me rearrange things." Wayne, the lounge manager, stepped forward, his voice deferential. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding. This seat is usually reserved for long-standing clients like Mr. Whitmore. Could I ask you to move to the east side? The view is lovely there, too." In that moment, Adriana felt dozens of eyes pressing against her. A couple whispered behind their champagne. A businessman paused his typing to watch. Bystanders, accustomed to seeing people like her, pushed aside. Adriana closed her tablet, placed it on the table deliberately, each motion slow and precise. "I am also a platinum member," she said evenly. "There is no policy reserving seats. I arrived first." I will not move. Bradley stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. Listen, I don't care who you are. This is my seat. I've sat here long before you appeared. Adriana's eyes sparked with fire. I know exactly who you are, Bradley. But this is Sky Lumen's lounge, not your living room. I'm here legitimately, with a card, with a first-class ticket. I will not give it up. The room froze into silence. Wayne cleared his throat, lowering his voice but adding weight to it. If you won't cooperate, we will have to call security. Heat surged through Adriana's chest, a familiar feeling, the same one that came with being sidelined and forced into compliance. But this time, she would not leave quietly. She pulled out her phone and pressed record. Let's be clear, she said slowly, each word deliberate. I am being asked to vacate this seat only because a white man wants it. This is discrimination, and I will have the evidence. Wayne's face drained of color. Carlton faltered. Bradley let out a sharp laugh. You really think a camera will help you? You don't understand your place here, he sneered. Adriana met his gaze, her voice ringing like steel. No, it's you who doesn't understand my place. In Bradley's mind, she was nothing more than a troublesome woman, an outsider clinging to her rights. To Carlton and Wayne, she was just a difficult customer to be removed in order to appease the powerful. But only Adriana knew the truth. She was the largest shareholder of Sky Lumen Airlines itself. A faint smile curved her lips, hidden within her fury. She let them summon security, let the whispers swirl. Because she knew in just a few hours this chair would become a symbol, not a seat in a lounge, but a stand for justice. When Trevor and Noah, two security guards, appeared, the air tightened to the breaking point. You need to leave now, Trevor ordered, hand on his radio. Adriana sat tall, her phone still recording. I will not move. If you want, drag me out. And let the world see how Sky Lumen Airlines treats its platinum passengers. For a moment, silence consumed the lounge. Then came the heavy stomp of boots. Two men lunged forward, and with that, the tragedy, or rather the turning point, had officially begun. Trevor stepped forward, shoulders broad like a wall, his calloused hand gripping Adriana's arm. Noah, younger, eyes flashing with eagerness, looked as if this was nothing more than his chance to prove loyalty to his superiors. Let's go, Trevor growled. The champagne glass tipped, spilling golden liquid across Adriana's white shirt, staining her navy blazer in streaks of humiliation. The entire lounge froze. No one intervened. No one spoke. Only the faint dripping of champagne onto the floor broke the silence, mixed with the shallow breaths of those secretly recording on their phones. Adriana kept her head high. Her eyes burned, her voice steady. You are forcibly removing a platinum member. You are assaulting me, right in front of these cameras. Dennis, the airport manager, stood with his arms crossed, his words slicing through clenched teeth. Get her out. There's no room for trouble here. Bradley Whitmore leaned back in the leather chair he had just claimed, raising a glass of scotch. His lips curled into a mocking smile. They dragged Adriana past the rows of seats, past faces that turned away. Some snapped hurried photos, others chose to look elsewhere. The silence weighed heavier than the humiliation itself. Inside Adriana's chest, memories surged. Her father returning from his shift with bloodied hands. Her mother dozing off at the dinner table after two back shifts. Her grandmother whispering, "You have to be twice as good just to be seen as half." The words rose with the cheap smell of alcohol soaking into her blazer. But instead of breaking her, they became fire. Outside the terminal, they released her. Trevor jerked his chin. "You're lucky. Not being banned from flying is a mercy." Adriana adjusted her blazer, champagne dripping down in long streaks, but her stance remained unshaken. Her eyes were calm, as though she were the one observing, not the one being cast out. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly but sure. One tap. "Bennett," she said, her voice low and steely. "I need you right now. Sky Lumen just made the biggest mistake of their lives." On the other end, Bennett Williams, her 47-year-old legal counsel, sharp and cold as a surgeon's blade, was silent for 3 beats. Then his voice thundered through. "What did they do?" "They dragged me out of the lounge, poured champagne on me, and I have it all on camera." "Good. Record everything. I'll draft an emergency shareholder summons immediately. We own 20.8% on. Tonight, they won't sleep." For a moment, Adriana closed her eyes. This was no longer humiliation. It was leverage. Meanwhile, social media erupted. Short clips captured from different angles, spread with the hashtag #boycott Sky Lumen. The first comment read, "A black female CEO dragged out of a luxury lounge just because a white man wanted her seat." Notifications buzzed on the phones of those still in the lounge, unease flashing across their faces. But Adriana was no longer there to see it. She stood in a small restroom, slipping into a spare black blouse. She caught her reflection in the mirror, hair still damp with wine, eyes blazing with an untamable fire. "Emergency meeting," Adriana said over video call, her tone sharp as steel. "We'll show them that underestimating me was the worst decision in their history." The screen lit up with familiar faces. Lila Morales, VP of Finance, Adrian Kwan, COO, and Bennett. They fell silent for a moment, taking in her stained blazer. "My God, they really," Lila began. Adriana cut her off, voice razor sharp. "Not pity. Action. Prepare the shareholder meeting. Pull every buried complaint file. From this moment on, Sky Lumen belongs to us." In a dark corner of the terminal, Adriana replayed the footage she had just captured. Trevor spilling the drink, Wayne pressing her, Carlton hesitating, Bradley smirking. Each face etched into evidence. She saved the clip into 3 separate folders, sent it to her lawyer, to her assistant, and kept one for herself. A reminder. This was not just a public battle. This was personal. When the boarding announcement rang out, Adriana stepped from the restroom, hair smoothed, blouse crisp and black. To outsiders, she looked like a stylish businesswoman who had just weathered a minor inconvenience. But inside, the storm had already formed, and it would consume those who had just tried to belittle her. Because Adriana Miles was not just a passenger. She was the woman who held 28% of the airline's fate in her hands. The restroom door closed behind her, but on the screen of her phone, the faces of Adriana's closest allies appeared one by one. The video feed flickered, then steadied. 3 windows lit up. Bennett Williams, her legal counsel, bow tie slightly askew, eyes sharp as blades. Lila Morales, Vice President of Finance, sleek black bob framing eyes taut with anger. Adrian Kwan, the COO, calm, but lips pressed tighter than usual. No one spoke at first. For several long seconds, they simply stared at Adriana's black blouse, still marked with damp stains, her unyielding eyes staring back through the camera. The silence was so heavy, it swallowed the hum of the ventilation around her. "What happened?" Adrian broke the stillness, his voice hoarse with fury. Adriana answered, each word clear, not a syllable wasted. Skylumen Airlines dragged me out of the lounge. Champagne spilled over my shirt. Security forced me outside. All of it in front of dozens of witnesses. And I recorded everything. Bennett raised an eyebrow, already typing furiously. The largest shareholder humiliated inside her own company's lounge. Perfect. We have the law, the evidence, the power. Lila inhaled sharply, fighting to contain her rage. Do you know Skylumen's stock has dropped 3% in just the past 40 minutes? The hashtag boycott Skylumen is trending nationwide. A thin smile flickered across Adriana's lips. Good. The blow will cut deeper than they expect. She lifted her chin and issued orders. Bennett, I want every single internal complaint file from Skylumen over the last 3 years, especially cases involving discrimination. Dig everything up. I want proof of a system, not just my incident. Understood, Bennett said, eyes gleaming. I'll draft an emergency shareholder summons immediately. With 28% ownership, we have the right. They will attend, whether they like it or not. Lila, Adriana continued, her tone firm, contact the investment team. See if we can acquire more shares. I want maximum control. And prepare a briefing for Vertex's shareholders. Explain exactly why this incident threatens the Tokyo deal. I understand, Lila nodded, eyes resolute. If Skylumen continues to collapse, investors will side with us automatically. They'll choose profit over protecting rotten leadership. Adriana turned to Adrian. Find me a private room, secure enough for an online shareholder meeting. And one more thing. Reach out to Senator Porter. She's been gathering evidence of discrimination in aviation. Tell her I'm ready to provide my case. Adrian's fingers flew across a secondary screen. Got it. There's an unused office in Zone B. I'll lock it down. And good news. Porter is in the city tonight. If needed, she'll meet you before your flight departs. Adriana closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling. Her heart still raced from the humiliation, but her veins now surged with new fuel, the fire of retaliation. Good. In 30 minutes we begin the shareholder meeting. I want everyone ready. The line stayed quiet until Bennett spoke, slow and deliberate. Adriana, they think they humiliated a passenger. In reality, they just woke a tiger they can never control. Adriana's lips curled into a cold smile. Exactly. They thought dragging me from a seat was victory. But the real seat is in the boardroom. She ended the call, slipped the phone into her bag, and clenched the handle tight. Inside, no trace of shame remained, only a furnace blazing hot. Somewhere back in the lounge, Bradley Whitmore was likely reclining in her seat, sipping scotch, convinced he had cornered her. But what he didn't know was that within hours, the very airline he relied on would be forced to kneel before the power of the woman he had just scorned. Adriana stepped out of the restroom and blended into the crowd flowing through the terminal. The champagne stain had dried dark across her sleeve, but she didn't care. Each step echoed inside her like an oath. We will bring the whole system down, and when the sun rises, Sky Lumen will belong to me. Adriana's phone buzzed relentlessly in her hand as she sat in the small office Adrian had secured. A bare room with harsh fluorescent lights bouncing off cold white walls, furnished with nothing more than a wooden desk and 3 plastic chairs. Yet from here, a global storm was beginning to take shape. On her screen, notifications flooded in. Boycott. Sky Lumen had climbed to the number 3 trending spot in less than an hour. Videos of Adriana being dragged out by security, her blouse drenched in champagne, were being shared hundreds of thousands of times. Many clips zoomed in on Bradley, lounging smugly in the seat she had been forced from, his scotch raised as if in a toast to injustice. On Twitter, a prominent professor wrote, "This is not just a woman being humiliated. This is living proof of how systems reward privilege and diminish those who are different." A young black student commented, "When I saw her being dragged out, I saw myself. All those times I was told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. But this time, we have evidence. We won't be silent anymore." Each word fanned the flames, fueling the firestorm. Sky Lumen's stock began free-falling. Lila Morales provided updates constantly. Down 7% in just 2 hours, the news has spread to Europe. Investment funds are starting to dump shares. Bennett, calm yet thunderous, remarked, "Good, let the market do its work. The harder it falls, the easier it is for us to seize more control." Adriana's hand trembled slightly as she listened, not from fear, but from the realization that power was shifting, slipping from the grasp of those who had mocked her and flowing toward her. Meanwhile, Bradley Whitmore sat in a first-class lounge, his phone ringing off the hook. His face paled when a Japanese advisor warned, "Several executives in Tokyo want to postpone tomorrow's meeting. They don't want to be associated with a company whose CEO is tied to a racism scandal." "Ridiculous," Bradley snapped, but his voice had lost its edge. He hurled the phone onto the table and drained his scotch, yet the liquor's burn couldn't mask the stench of failure creeping in. Across the Pacific, major networks ran the story. CNN's headline blared, "Black CEO dragged from VIP lounge seat to make way for white rival, racism or misunderstanding." MSNBC rushed a special segment with aviation experts discussing the invisible privilege in luxury travel. Fox News was more cautious, calling it a complex situation that needs investigation. But regardless of the spin, Adriana Miles's name dominated every screen. A call came through. Senator Elaine Porter appeared on video, her voice sharp as a blade. "Adriana, I've seen the clip. This is exactly the evidence I've been waiting for. I'll convene the Transportation Committee for hearings next week. They won't have anywhere left to hide." Adriana nodded, her eyes steely. I don't just want hearings. I want immediate consequences. Skylumen must pay from the lounge floor all the way to the boardroom. In the makeshift office, Adrian added, competitors smell blood. Delta, Aero World, Starjet just sent quiet congratulatory messages. They're offering you lifetime VIP memberships. What they really want is to exploit this to crush Skylumen's reputation. Adriana gave a cold, razor-thin smile. Let them watch. When I'm finished, Skylumen won't just lose customers, they'll lose their very soul. She looked around the shabby room, the peeling paint, the weak yellow light, the faint must of dust. Yet in her mind, it transformed into a battlefield. Outside, the world was roaring. Inside all, she and her team were preparing the decisive strike. Tonight, Adriana declared, her voice dropping like a war drum. We call the shareholder meeting. By morning, Skylumen will wake up in a new reality. Their leadership will be challenged, their bigots exposed, and the rules of the game will be rewritten forever. Out on the streets, massive screens in Times Square were already playing the video of her being dragged away. Passers-by stopped, pointed, whispered. A little girl tugged her mother's hand and asked, "Mum, why did they do that to her?" The innocent question sent a chill down Adriana's spine, because she knew this fight wasn't only for herself. It was for the next generation, for children who needed proof that injustice could be defied and that justice could prevail. The storm had broken, and at its eye, Adriana Miles stood tall. Not as a victim, but as the one holding the power to redefine what strength truly meant. The plane screeched against the runway at Haneda, tires shrieking as Tokyo shimmered in the glow of late afternoon. In the clear sky above, every ray of sunlight cut down like slender blades across the gleaming metal of the aircraft. In the first-class cabin, Adriana sat upright. Her phone screen kept flashing with headlines. Skylumen down 12% in half a day. Images of her being dragged out of the lounge filled every broadcast, from CNN to NHK. But now was not the time to look back. Now was the moment to prove her worth on the other side of the world. As she stepped out of the international terminal, dozens of lenses blinded her. Reporters pushed forward, microphones raised. "Ms. Miles, are you suing Skylumen? How will this affect the Tokyo contract? Do you have a message for Mr. Bradley Whitmore?" Adriana paused for a beat, drawing in a long breath. Every flash felt like a bullet, but she stood tall. Her voice was calm, each word ringing like a bell. "I came here to discuss the future of global cybersecurity, not to argue about injustice. But remember this: justice has no borders. I believe the whole world is watching." Her words exploded instantly across Japanese social media, translated into multiple languages. And in a hotel only a few blocks away, Bradley Whitmore clenched his fist as he watched the footage on screen. At the Tokyo International Finance Center, Adriana entered the conference hall. The vast space rose with a glass ceiling, light reflecting off marble floors. Before her sat over 30 senior leaders from Japan's largest banks, technology corporations, and government agencies. In the front row, Hiroshi Nakamura, 60-6, CEO of the nation's largest bank, sat upright, his aged yet sharp eyes fixed squarely on her. Beside him, Colleagues whispered, their expressions a mixture of sternness and curiosity. Adriana opened her laptop, fingers tapping on the table in rhythm, like a drum roll. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began in English, then shifted into a few Japanese phrases she had practiced for days. Her accent was imperfect, but the sincerity was clear. Faces that had seemed closed softened, a few heads nodding in approval. She presented Vertex Innovations' AI security system, a virtual shield capable of detecting and neutralizing the most sophisticated cyber attacks. On the large screen, charts revealed a flawless 100% detection rate in blind trials. Numbers that spoke louder than words. Questions came fast. A bank executive pressed about scalability. A government official asked about operating costs. A technology specialist demanded to review algorithmic logic. Adriana answered each one, her voice steady, eyes bright, occasionally signaling to Mei Kobayashi, the Tokyo branch's chief engineer, for deeper technical clarifications. She wasn't just answering, she was telling a story. How Vertex was born in a dorm room, how it rose to stand against giants. In Nakamura's eyes, a spark of respect began to glow. When the presentation ended, silence blanketed the room. Then, unexpectedly, Nakamura rose to his feet, something rarely seen in Japanese boardrooms. "Ms. Miles," he said in English, his voice deep and even. "We saw the video from Sky Lumen. Many would have faltered after such humiliation. But you arrived here, prepared, and delivered a remarkable presentation that says much about you and about your company." The room stirred. A few executives nodded with approval. Adriana bowed deeply, her heart swelling with emotion. At another hotel, Bradley Whitmore and his team sat frozen before a live broadcast. One associate muttered, "Nakamura has never praised a partner in front of the entire council." Bradley's knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists. In his mind, only one thought remained. Everything was slipping out of control. Back in the car, Adriana sat quietly, her phone buzzing with an endless stream of updates. Sky Lumen stock had fallen another 5%. The Transportation Committee had formally issued a subpoena for hearings. Major shareholders were demanding an emergency board meeting. Adrian, seated beside her, half smiling, half stunned, remarked, "In just a few hours, you've crippled an airline and nearly secured a $750 million contract." Adriana gazed out the window, neon lights of Tokyo casting reflections across her face. Her eyes were not those of someone celebrating victory, but of one who had long been familiar with battles without end. That night above Tokyo's sky, Adriana Miles was no longer just a CEO. She had become a symbol, a living proof that dignity cannot be stripped away, even when the world tries to drag you down from the seat that was rightfully yours. Sky Lumen Airlines headquarters, 30th floor, the grand boardroom lined with polished oak. The air was thick with the scent of strong coffee and anxious sweat. All 12 members of the board sat pale and restless, eyes darting constantly to the massive LED screen at the center of the room. 9 p.m. in New York, 10 a.m. in Tokyo. The screen lit up, the video feed connected. Adriana Miles appeared, the white light of the Tokyo International Finance Center reflecting against her face, her black suit impeccable, her eyes sharp as blades. Silence. No one dared breathe heavily. They all knew. The woman who had just been dragged from the lounge was their largest shareholder. William Fletcher, chairman of the board, cleared his throat. "This meeting is to discuss the incident that occurred. No," Adriana cut him off, her voice like steel. "Do not call it an incident. Call it what it is, systemic discrimination. And I have proof." Bennett Williams appeared in a smaller window and quickly shared his screen. One by one, the videos played. Carlton hesitating as he checked the platinum card, Wayne pressing her to move, Dennis giving the order to eject her, Trevor spilling champagne, Bradley Whitmore sinking into her seat with a mocking grin. Every image was a blade slicing through Sky Lumen's reputation. A female board member buried her face in her hands and whispered, "My God, the media has already seen all of this." Adriana nodded. "And they are not just watching. They are punishing. Your stock price has dropped more than 20%. Customers are cancelling flights en masse. Rival airlines are openly courting your VIP clients. Do you not see yourselves in free fall?" William tried to steady his tone. "We have terminated Dennis Morgan and Wayne Simmons. 2 security officers have been suspended. Not enough." Adriana cut him off again, her voice resonant. "This is not about a few bad actors. This is an entire infestation." Bennett brought up another file on screen, a thick stack of documents. 43 complaints of discrimination in the last 3 years, 11 tied directly to VIP lounges, 3 naming Dennis Morgan by name. Every single one buried. The room erupted in whispers. One board member slammed a fist against the table, his voice trembling. "Did we really ignore all of this?" Adriana's gaze pierced through the camera. "No, you did not ignore. You chose to ignore for short-term profit, for cozy ties with privileged clients, and today, that choice is destroying you." The screen shifted, showing 5 faces seated at a side table in the boardroom. Carlton, Wayne, Trevor, Noah, and Dennis, all directly involved. Their faces were pale, eyes darting nervously. Adriana narrowed her eyes. "You thought I would not know? Carlton, you dragged out checking my card because I did not look like your usual member. Wayne, you invoked tradition of regular guests to push me out. Trevor, Noah, you manhandled me as if I were a criminal. Dennis, you gave the order, fully aware I was in the right. And finally, Bradley Whitmore, the man you catered to, is in fact my competitor trying to steal the Tokyo contract." Each accusation landed like the slam of a gavel. Among the board, some whispered, "If Whitmore was given that much favoritism, was there collusion?" Another muttered bitterly, "We've become an international laughingstock." Adriana slowly placed the thick file on the table beside her in Tokyo. Her voice lowered, sharper than a knife. "Here are my terms. As a shareholder holding 32%, with another 28% in allied votes. Terminate all staff involved. Remove CEO Gregory Stanton immediately. Establish an independent oversight board on discrimination. Appoint Zara Williams, 40th on 6, former COO in the airline industry, as CEO. Someone with real competence, not a puppet of privilege." The boardroom erupted in chaos. William Fletcher's face flushed red. "This is a coup!" "No," Adriana replied coldly. "This is rescue. If you refuse, Sky Lumen will be bankrupt before sunrise." A heavy silence fell. Then, one by one, hands rose. The votes were counted swiftly. The outcome was irreversible. Gregory Stanton, the CEO, his face drained of all color, collapsed into his chair, muttering, "Just one seat. Just one seat." Adriana looked directly into the camera. No, not just one seat. It was dignity. And whenever you disregard the dignity of a human being, the price you pay will be an empire. The meeting closed with the echo of a gavel striking hard. A new era had begun. Adriana Miles had turned personal humiliation into a revolution that toppled an entire leadership. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, the 25th floor of Sky Lumen headquarters. A small conference room with a low ceiling and harsh neon lights. 6 chairs lined up across half the room. On the table sat a few unopened bottles of water and scattered papers, but the air was heavy with tension. Carlton, Wayne, Trevor, Noah, Dennis, all sat there. Shirts wrinkled, ties loosened, sweat beading on their faces. Some stared at the floor. Others crossed their arms in defiance. For the first time, the men who were used to giving orders now had to wait for judgment. The door opened. Adriana walked in. Her black suit was perfectly fitted, her eyes cold. Beside her was Brenda Martinez, the newly appointed head of human resources, and Bennett Williams, carrying a thick stack of files. The sound of Adriana's heels striking the floor echoed like the drumbeat of reckoning. No one dared speak. Adriana took her seat at the head of the table, set her case down, and clicked the lock open. She pulled out 5 thin files and slid one to each of them. "These are your work histories. I have read every word." Dennis gave a dry laugh, trying to cling to his old authority. "If you plan to turn this into a trial, I will not," Adriana cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "This is not a trial. This is accountability. And you will listen." She turned her gaze to Carlton. "You took longer than necessary to check my card." "Why?" Carlton swallowed hard, eyes avoiding hers. I just thought it was unusual. Platinum is usually someone else." "Someone else?" Adriana raised an eyebrow. "You mean middle-aged white men in suits, not women of color like me, correct?" Carlton stayed silent. His silence was the answer. She moved to Wayne. Adriana flipped open his file. "Mr. Simmons, your name appears in 3 separate complaints. Each time, the issue was prioritizing white, frequent flyers over others. How do you explain this?" Wayne smacked his lips, voice faltering. We just followed custom. Whoever flew longer got preference." "Custom?" Adriana slammed the file down on the table. "There is no custom written into the membership contract. It exists only in the minds of those who believe privilege is law, and you used that excuse to justify discrimination." Wayne lowered his head in silence. Adriana turned to Trevor and Noah. "You dragged me out as if I were a criminal. Trevor, you even spilled champagne onto my clothes. Was that your version of security protocol?" Trevor's face flushed red, his jaw tight. "We were following orders." Adriana's voice cut through, slow and deliberate. Those who blindly follow orders without questioning right from wrong are no different than accomplices. Noah kept his head down, voice trembling. I knew it was wrong, but at that moment it was easier to obey. Adriana locked her eyes on him. Easier is always the excuse that allows injustice to continue. Finally, she turned to Dennis. "Mr. Morgan, you were the senior officer on site. You gave the order to eject me, despite seeing that I had a valid card and ticket. Why?" Dennis lifted his head, eyes defiant. "Because you were causing trouble. You were filming, drawing attention. I had to maintain order." "Order?" Adriana let out a bitter laugh. "What kind of order is maintained when a woman is dragged out to make room for a white, male competitor? What kind of order is preserved when that very act sent the entire airline into chaos?" Dennis clenched his jaw, but had nothing more to say. Adriana folded her arms, eyes sweeping across all five. "You all thought your actions carried no consequences, but today the consequences are here. Termination is inevitable. But I will not stop at punishment." Brenda nodded, pulling out 5 more folders and handing them around. "This is the rehabilitation program. Mandatory training on implicit bias, community service, and supervised probation. Those who accept will have the chance to reapply under probation. Those who refuse will be permanently dismissed." Carlton looked up, his voice catching. "A second chance really exists." Adriana's gaze was steady, her tone unwavering. "I do not grant this chance because you deserve it. I grant it because the system itself must change. And sometimes, change has to begin with those who once committed the wrong." Wayne whispered, I will do it. I know I was wrong." Trevor gripped the papers tightly, eyes burning. "I have a family. I cannot lose this job. If I must learn, I will learn." Only Dennis crossed his arms, face flushed with anger. "Nonsense. This is humiliation. I will not accept any so-called rehabilitation." Adriana gave a slight nod, as if she had expected it. "Then you will leave, and you will carry this stain for the rest of your career." She rose to her feet, her voice dropping low, every word striking like a gavel. "This was never just about a seat. This is a lesson for the entire industry. Injustice has a price, and that price is enough to topple an empire." With that, Adriana walked out. The door slammed shut, leaving behind 5 faces twisted with anger, regret, and confusion. But one truth was now undeniable. The era of no accountability was over. The grand hall of the Westfield Hotel glowed under crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of business leaders, politicians, and scholars sat neatly in tuxedos and evening gowns. On stage, bold letters scrolled across the LED screen. Business Ethics Awards. Responsible Leadership Recognition. Adriana Miles's name was called. Applause thundered like a storm, rolling on without end. Adriana stepped forward. A long black gown hugged her figure, her eyes burning with a fire forged in hardship. She stood before the microphone, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Accountability is not punishment. It is the way we turn promises into action. Only when responsibility is enforced do the statements on a website become truths in people's lives. In the audience, many nodded in agreement. In the front row, Zara Williams, the new CEO of Sky Lumen, smiled quietly. Over the past 6 months under her leadership, the airline had transformed so completely that analysts now called it the Miles Standard. The Miles Standard was not a few lines of policy. It was a system, strict first, come first, served seating in every lounge, an independent oversight board to handle complaints with no more buried files, mandatory training on unconscious bias for all employees, and, most importantly, transparency. Customer service records were now audited randomly and without warning. The results spoke for themselves. 6 months later, Sky Lumen's stock not only recovered, but reached new highs. From the center of scandal, the airline had become a model of reform. Meanwhile, Vertex Innovations, under Adriana's leadership, had signed multiple new contracts. The $750 million Tokyo deal quickly paved the way for others, pushing the total value above $1 billion. Vertex had become a global symbol of cybersecurity. In contrast, Bradley Whitmore had fallen apart. After the viral video of him smirking with a glass in hand, Whitmore Tech's shareholders called an emergency meeting. More scandals surfaced. Bradley was ousted, and the company plunged into investigations. From the man seated in the privileged chair, he became the man who lost everything. Back at the award hall, Adriana paused, scanning the crowd. I was once dragged out of a seat in front of everyone. They thought they had silenced me. But the truth is, she stopped, her voice dropping low. They gave me the reason to change an entire system. Applause erupted, this time mixed with cheers of her name. After the ceremony, Adriana stood in the hotel hallway. Amid the stream of people offering congratulations, a small hand tugged at her sleeve. A young black girl, about 10 years old, clutched a tablet displaying Adriana's picture. "Are you Miss Miles?" Adriana bent down, smiling. "Yes, I am." The girl's eyes sparkled. "I chose you for my school project. We had to write about a hero. You're my hero. I want to be a CEO like you." Adriana froze, her heart tightening, not from pain, but from the realization that the seed she had planted had taken root in the next generation. "You will," she whispered. "And when someone tells you that you don't belong somewhere, remember, sometimes the strongest act is simply not leaving your seat." That night, as her car drove her back to the hotel, Adriana looked out the window. The city was drenched in neon lights, reflected in her eyes. 6 months ago, the world saw her dragged out of a lounge like an outsider. Today, the world saw her as a symbol, not because she was a victim, but because she had turned humiliation into power. She had turned a chair into a symbol of justice. She had turned silence into thunder. That legacy would live on, in policies, in companies, and in the eyes of children like that little girl. And Adriana Miles knew this with certainty. The fight against injustice would never end. But she had already proven to all that a woman underestimated could change an entire industry. Management experts often say, a crisis does not create leaders, it only reveals who the true leaders are. Adriana Miles never sought attention, but the way she transformed personal humiliation into sweeping reform proved exactly that. Her story reminds us that dignity is never a privilege, it is a birthright. And when injustice is exposed along with its real consequences, the entire system is forced to change. If you believe that courageous actions like Adriana's can change the world, hit like to spread this message, subscribe so you don't miss the next powerful stories, and leave a comment with just 2 words, "No compromise," to affirm that you too will stand firm in the face of injustice.